All right, welcome back, history students, to today's Explainer. Now, we're looking at a period today that might actually seem like recent memory to some, but it is absolutely foundational historical text for our modern era. We're going to be exploring the period from 1989 through the early 2000s, and this was just a crucial era. It was full of immense tension, incredibly rapid transformation, and honestly, it directly built the 21st century world that we live in right now. It was a time when all the old certainties of the past were basically dismantled, making way for a completely new, highly complex reality.
So here's our syllabus for today. We're going to use 6 key themes to navigate this decade: a new global order, progress and societal fractures, the centrist and the partisans, new threats and violence, the digital age dawn, and finally, the contested 2000 election.
Let's dive right into Section 1, a new global order.
We're kicking things off with a massive international shift. The world map was quite literally being redrawn in real time. In 1989 alone, we see the profound impact of global democratic movements. Now, in Beijing's Tiananmen Square, pro-democracy protests were brutally crushed by military force. But simultaneously, communist regimes over in Eastern Europe were just completely collapsing. That movement was really punctuated by the iconic falling of the Berlin Wall in November 1989. And this massive wave culminated in 1991 with the official dissolution of the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, you've got the US-led coalition in the 1990 Gulf War successfully liberating Kuwait, which essentially established a brand new precedent for post-Cold War international cooperation.
So what does this all mean? Well, it created a massive paradigm shift. Almost overnight, the global landscape shifted from a strictly bipolar world, dominated purely by the US and the USSR, to a highly complex, multipolar reality. On one hand, the end of the Cold War brought a great sense of relief. The existential threat of nuclear annihilation really faded. But on the flip side, it introduced profound uncertainty. Without that strict binary of the Cold War kind of keeping a lid on things, new unpredictable ethnic and regional conflicts started to emerge all over the globe.
Moving on to Section 2, progress in societal fractures. Now, while the world stage was transforming, that unprecedented foreign policy success didn't really insulate the US from some intense domestic growing pains. There's this stark contrast between legislative progress and lived reality during this window. On one side, we see monumental legislative achievements, like the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990. This provided landmark civil rights protections for individuals with physical or mental impairments. Huge step forward, right? But then simultaneously, you have the 1992 acquittal of the police officers in the Rodney King beating case, which sparked the massive LA riots. And this wasn't just an isolated incident. It was the worst civil unrest in 20th century US history, and it violently exposed deep-seated racial divisions that connected directly to broader national themes of systemic inequality.
And this brings us to a rather harsh political reality. Right after the Gulf War, President George H.W. Bush had a staggering 89% approval rating. But as we know, public perception is notoriously fickle, especially when the economy falters. You see, a sluggish economic recession, combined with the breaking of his famously clear campaign pledge, read my lips, no new taxes, well, it utterly destroyed his administration's economic credibility. And this potent combination of a stalling economy and a broken promise led directly to Bush's electoral defeat in 1992. Which brings us to Section 3, the centrist and the partisans.
That electoral shift brought in the Clinton presidency, and it presents just a fascinating duality. Bill Clinton positioned himself as a new Democrat, taking a very centrist approach. And under his administration, the nation experienced a sustained economic boom. We're talking low unemployment, the first federal budget surpluses in decades, and massive growth in the tech sector. But right alongside that unprecedented prosperity, we saw the rise of intense partisan conflict. After the administration failed to pass universal health care, the 1994 Republican Revolution, led by Newt Gingrich and their contract with America, swept right into power. And this really ushered in an era of deep culture wars and the rapidly rising influence of conservative media voices.
Now, this partisan warfare reached its absolute zenith with the impeachment saga. The historical data points show a timeline where the initial Whitewater investigation eventually shifted its focus toward the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Ultimately, President Clinton was impeached by the House for perjury and obstruction of justice, though he was subsequently acquitted by the Senate. But what you really need to take away from this is the profound societal effect. This whole saga deeply entrenched the national political polarization that would firmly carry forward right into the 21st century.
All right, let's turn to Section 4, new threats and violence. Beneath the surface of this ostensibly prosperous decade, there were some incredibly dark undercurrents. It was an era punctuated by shocking violence. In 1995, the Oklahoma City bombing, which was motivated by domestic anti-government sentiment, became the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in U.S. history. We also saw horrific societal violence, like the Columbine High School shooting in 1999. That sparked intense, agonizing national debates over gun control and youth culture. And simultaneously, a brand new era of international terrorism was rising. Led by Osama bin Laden, the al-Qaeda network began targeting U.S. interests globally, carrying out the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and the year 2000 attack on the USS Cole. And violence wasn't just a threat at home, it was actually a primary driver of U.S. foreign intervention during this time. The term ethnic cleansing tragically defined several global conflicts throughout the 90s. The U.S. intervened in crises in Somalia, Haiti, and Yugoslavia. In Yugoslavia specifically, brutal ethnic violence led to international intervention that ultimately resulted in the Dayton Peace Accords to end the war in Bosnia.
Next up, Section 5, the Digital Age Dawn. Now we pivot to what is undeniably the most transformative element of this era. I mean, if you can imagine a world where getting online meant tying up your home phone line with a screaming dial-up modem, you start to understand how revolutionary these stepping stones actually were. The politics and conflicts were significant, for sure, but this rapid evolution of technology fundamentally rewired human existence. First, you have visionaries like Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, Bill Gates, and Paul Allen driving the personal computer revolution, literally turning computers from massive industrial mainframes into essential tools for the home. Then, Tim Berners-Lee invents the World Wide Web, creating the information superhighway. Pretty soon, companies like Google and Napster completely revolutionized how we search for information and share media. But as with all rapid innovations, raw speculation took over, leading to the massive dot-com bubble that inevitably peaked and crashed in the year 2000.
The societal impacts of this, they simply cannot be overstated. This digital dawn altered absolutely every facet of American life. It completely changed commerce, it transformed how you are receiving your education right now, and it shrank the globe. But it also raised profound new anxieties. We're talking unprecedented concerns regarding personal privacy and the creation of a new digital divide between those who had access to this empowering technology and those who were suddenly left behind.
Finally, we arrive at Section 6, the contested 2000 election. To conclude our lesson today, we arrive at the extraordinary event that really capped the decade and tested the very fabric of the American system. The year 2000 brought one of the most controversial elections in United States history, Bush versus Gore. The entire presidential race hinged on extremely narrow, razor-thin margins and a heavily disputed vote countdown in the state of Florida. The situation was completely unprecedented, and it ultimately led to Supreme Court intervention. In the case of Bush v. Gore, the Supreme Court halted the Florida recount, which effectively awarded the presidency to George W. Bush. Impartially speaking, looking at the history, the sheer mechanics and resolution of this election left the nation deeply, deeply divided.
Which leaves us with this final, absolutely vital question to ponder. How did a decade that began with the triumphant collapse of the Berlin Wall and the massive expansion of global democracy end with Americans questioning the very integrity of their own electoral process? It's a remarkable contradiction, isn't it? And understanding how we got from point A to point B is exactly why we study history in the first place. The 1990s weren't just the end of the 20th century, they were the literal blueprint for the complex, hyper-connected, and deeply polarized world we navigate today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history that builds our present.